Hello and welcome to episode 134 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the stream of dreams, the show of shows, and everything in between. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That is linktree.com/GnittWitt. GnittWitt. I am on Instagram. I am on Threads. I am on YouTube. I am on TikTok. I am on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, which is a weird thing to say up at the top because, you know, there are some people who definitely watch us on YouTube, and that's fine. Hello, YouTube people. But if it is a podcast, wouldn't you already know where to get the podcast because of the way podcasts work? This is something that I frequently think about. I just lay in bed thinking, how do people get podcasts? And it's probably, you know, that there's an app on your phone. Go buy a new phone. Go, you know, and the Apple Podcast app is just right there. It's just right there for you to enjoy. I've never thought about getting into radio dramas and radio plays, but maybe we need to bring that back. I know the podcasting is very hot right now. Thanks a lot, Joe Rogan. But I've thought maybe I just need to get into like dramatic voiceover readings and, you know, radio plays, radio dramas, and all of that stuff. I mean, really, who cares about video games and video game news and all of the things that are going on? Because I'll tell you right now, for all the good that comes out of the video game industry, let me tell you, there's a lot of bad that comes out of it as well. I didn't even get to initially writing down all of the bad stuff that happened this week because it was kind of breaking news. I was like I bought coffee, so maybe I shouldn't show it. Well, I kind of showed it on camera. Oh well, I bought coffee today instead of making coffee at home, and in doing so, I was standing in line, kind of reading my phone, going through my phone, things like that as part of the waiting in line for coffee press. I don't know, I feel like a hack stand-up comedian. You ever like waited in line somewhere? What's the deal with airline food? It's funny that like the joke now with portraying yourself as like a hack comedian is to just reference an old Jerry Seinfeld bit. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Jerry Seinfeld is a hack comedian because I don't know if I want to endure the wrath of people who disagree with that. But like, you know, the things that you like about, I'll say this before we get to talking about video games, the things that you probably like about Jerry Seinfeld are actually things that you like about Larry David. They're probably actually things that you like about Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Jason Alexander. And maybe there's some things that you still like about Michael Richards today. You know, it's been a while since he said the things that Michael Richards said, but I'm like slapping my iPad here, just trying to think of how I'm going to end this god-awful segment and start talking about video games. The point is that, like, you know, I'll tell you right now, Jerry Seinfeld, probably not the worst comedian. You know, hey, what a bold stance and brave, you know, opinion to have. Jerry Seinfeld, probably not the worst stand-up comedian, but like, come on. It was the 90s. Come on. I say come on, it was the 90s as if I wasn't born in freaking 1994 and don't know what I'm talking about. But I'll tell you what. I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to video games, and god damn it, we're going to talk about video games. They are putting TNA wrestlers in WWE 2K25. That's not breaking news. In fact, I was going to completely skip over this news story, but I can't help myself. So you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Let's just cover all of the DLC characters that are coming to WWE 2K25. In case you're curious who you're going to be able to pay extra money to play as. You know what? Whatever. Actually, I got to be honest. This is actually a pretty decent. It's a decent roster. This is not the top story, and in fact, I'm even going completely out of order. But I've said it, so let's talk about it. Iconic TNA wrestlers are going to debut in WWE 2K25 DLC alongside NBA stars. That's right, baby. So they're going to do waves of different DLC packs. You can buy them individually. You can buy the collection, whatever you want to do. WWE 2K25 isn't even out yet. But you might be wondering, GnittWitt, what are the different DLC packs that I can expect for WWE 2K25? Well, I have them right here. Now, I just want to say this up at the top before I cover the list, and this is related to the list. This is not me ranting about Jerry Seinfeld. WWE 2K games have some of the most out-of-date roster in any sports game that is an annualized franchise because of how quick things move within the WWE and, wrestling in general. You think about how, I'll listen to, friends and family talk about, I don't know, hockey, and they'll be like, man, they've been trying to get rid of this guy for 6 months, trade him to whatever and move him around and contract buyouts and all that stuff, where it's like, no, dude, they'll just cut somebody in WWE or even AEW like that in some cases, or they'll just hire somebody immediately. So if the names that I'm reading out to you seem like names that should have been in the game by default, you're probably right, but instead you get the privilege of paying more money to play as these characters. All right, the new wave pack coming out. That's new wave, not new day. The new wave pack that's coming out in May, that is going to feature Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, the Motor City Machine Guns, Julia and Stephanie Vaquer, as well as a celebrity guest to be announced. I hope that it is WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump. That way you can put wrestling moves on. I was going to say something horribly violent, but then you can put the wrestling moves on Donald Trump. In June, you're going to get the Dunk and Destruction pack, which is going to feature Abyss, who is the legendary TNA wrestler, Great Khali, as well as 3 NBA stars. Don't know who those NBA stars are. I hope it is Vince Carter, LeBron James, and oh gosh, I can't. The Shaquille O'Neal. There you go. There we go. The Fearless pack that's coming out in July of 2025. That's going to feature New Jack, Jordan Grace, who is also a TNA wrestler. Wait, is Jordan Grace? Hold on. Fact checking is going to ruin this podcast, and I know it. And is Jordan Grace with WWE or is she with TNA? She's with WWE, right? Okay, great. All right, well, great. Okay, well, great. Now, what the fuck do I know? I'm not watching a lot of TNA. I'm also not watching any WWE. I am preparing myself to watch WWE. It takes a moment for me to get my body ready to watch WWE. We are on the road to WrestleMania, which might explain why we're talking about this in the first place. But anyways, now I know. Jordan Grace with WWE. Thumbs up. New Jack, Jordan Grace, Penta. That is Penta El Zero Miedo, who is now with WWE, as well as Bull Nakano. And you're also going to get another celebrity guest to be announced. That is for the Fearless pack in July. The Attitude Era Superstars pack is in September. You're getting D'Lo Brown. You're getting Billy Gunn. You're getting Road Dogg Victoria and Mark Henry. Billy Gunn, the only active AEW wrestler who is going to be in this game's DLC packs. These other people do not actively wrestle for AEW. So that's D'Lo Brown, Billy Gunn, Road Dogg Victoria, and Mark Henry. And then finally in November, Saturday night's main event pack, you're going to get Jesse Ventura, Wonderful, Tito Santana, Junkyard Dog, and Sid Justice. Now, I hate to talk about wrestling at the start of the show. I know we've already ruined a perfectly good episode of the show talking about wrestling. But I want to talk about Split Fiction for a moment. Split Fiction is the new game from Hazelight Studios and EA. And the reason why I'm bringing up Split Fiction is not necessarily because it's a game and it's a new game and it's a new noteworthy game, newsworthy game. It's because I don't often talk about cooperative games on this podcast. I'll talk about single player games, story-based games, single player games, open world games, whatever. And I will talk about, multiplayer competitive games, whether that's like, my time with Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or Fortnite or something like that. But I don't often talk about cooperative games. So for those of you that are listening to the show and are curious about, playing a game cooperatively with friends and family and things like that, what we're going to do is we're going to do a review roundup of Split Fiction, so that you can get an idea of what to expect and see if that is a game that is right for you and the people in your life that may be interested in playing it. That game is going to be out tomorrow, so Split Fiction is not going to be out until tomorrow, out on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC. Now, first out of the bat, the thing that kind of intrigued me about this game was not necessarily the premise or the fact that it is a co-op only game. That is a co-op only game is something that Hazelight Studios has done for a while now. Hazelight, if you don't know, are also the people that made It Takes Two, as well as A Way Out. They also made Brothers. Now, in the case of Brothers, you could play Brothers by yourself, but it is a multiplayer cooperative story-based game. In the case of Split Fiction, it seems to be two people trapped in opposite worlds. Like one player is in like a futuristic sci-fi world and the other is in a fantasy world, and they're kind of playing parallel versions of the game in these different worlds. If you're listening to the audio version, you're really missing out on the hand gestures I do as I try to describe the splitting of the fiction in Split Fiction. But it's this idea of these kind of two characters traversing through these parallel worlds at the same time as part of the cooperative experience. Like, I think Split Fiction is like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a split screen game, right? Like, whether you play it multiplayer online or side by side, I'm pretty sure it is a split screen game, no matter how you do it. But one of the big things that intrigued me is the reviews for this game. I've done review roundups for a couple of weeks now, and I like the idea of just like kind of getting a temperature check of, what's hot, what's not, what's reviewing well, because in a lot of cases, a game will come out highly anticipated. It may not do so hot. Maybe a game that was going to fly under people's radar comes out with huge reviews. And in the case of Split Fiction, we're looking at a 90 average on opencritic.com, 90 average, with 97% of critics recommending the game. And you might be thinking, well, how many critics have gotten the chance to review the game so far? 75 critical reviews up now for you to reference and read through over at opencritic.com. Split Fiction is ranked in the 99th percentile of games scored on opencritic.com. These are big review scores for Split Fiction. So let's kind of cover the reviews, what kind of the critical consensus is for Split Fiction. IGN.com. You know them, you love them. They're usually giving 8s and 7s to your favorite thing of all time. They give it a 9 out of 10, saying an expertly crafted and absorbing co-op adventure that pinballs from one genre extreme to another. Split Fiction is a roller coaster of gameplay ideas and styles that are usually discarded as quickly as they're introduced. Eurogamer gave it a 5 out of 5, saying fantastic from start to finish. Split Fiction is one of the most inventive and joyful co-op games to date, and a testament to the power of human imagination. Now, PC Gamer giving it an 87 out of 100, saying an incredibly inventive, rapid-fire co-op adventure that never breaks its stride despite its dull protagonist. Now, we're getting a lot of high scores. PC Gamer, maybe one of the lower scores that I'm seeing so far on this list. Games Radar Plus giving it a 4.5 out of 5, saying Hazelight has created another brilliant adventure that's going straight into our best co-op games list. Split Fiction is quite the opposite of industry trends right now. Amidst everything, it's a bastion of ingenuity and gives me hope that creativity isn't as quite in danger as I feared. Split Fiction got a 10 out of 10 by GameSpot, saying Split Fiction is more than a hilarious, compassionate, and delightful new benchmark for multiplayer experiences. It is a remarkable love letter to creativity, video games, and companionship. And I would say, like, gameplay wise, Split Fiction is in that sort of action adventure mold, right? Whatever, kind of, with maybe some jumping, some running, some puzzles, some combat. Maybe I haven't actually seen a lot of the combat in the game, but if you're wondering, like, how does Split Fiction play, it is that, but it is in a forced multiplayer sort of experience. Kotaku does not give scores, and they are people a few words when it comes to this blurb here that says Hazelight's latest co-op adventure is an excellent victory lap. What do we got here? Rock Paper Shotgun does not give review scores either, and they said a cinematic co-op full of novelties that might keep you thoughtlessly entertained for a weekend. Just don't count on the author heroes to write an interesting story. Video Games Chronicles, as always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. They said 4 out of 5 for Split Fiction, which is Split Fiction is visually streets ahead of its predecessor, It Takes Two, but mechanically the two games are very similar. The game is occasionally in danger of verging into repetitive territory with its constant shifting between two main environments, but its healthy selection of varied side stories and its constantly changing mechanics ensure its gameplay remains engaging and entertaining throughout, even if the same can't always be said for its story. Anyways, like I said, I want to do this because I don't often talk about a lot of co-op games. Probably the last co-op game I really probably spent any time talking about was like Destiny 2. And Destiny 2 does not even have to be a game you play cooperatively with people if you don't want to. But if you're looking for a story-based game to play with friends and family with co-op, you're probably going to have a hard time finding anything better than Split Fiction. Of course, if you haven't played It Takes Two or A Way Out, you could also check that out. All of those games from Hazelight Studios. Let's kick things off. 20 minutes into this podcast, however long into this podcast we are, let's finally kick things off. We have been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. It has now been confirmed. It has been unveiled. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 Remastered is coming to consoles and PC, and it's going to be out in July. That is going to be July 11th specifically. However, if you would like to spend extra money on the video game, you can get early access as part of the reason why you would spend extra money on the video game by getting a chance to play it July 8th. It's going to feature cross-platform online multiplayer. It's coming out on Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PS5, PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. It will also be launching day one on Game Pass Ultimate and PC Game Pass. They are also doing the thing where if you would like the Game Pass version of the game, but would like to get the early access deluxe edition of the game, you can do that and just buy the game, just buy the DLC separately. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go load up the store, the Game Pass thingy, the Game Pass thingy. How much is this game? This game is $67 on just buying it outright. It's about $67. I'm looking at the Canadian pricing here on the Xbox store. So, $67. You can also buy the digital deluxe edition for the game. I am trying to find the pricing for that digital deluxe edition. That's $90. So you can spend $90 and get the digital deluxe edition of the game. But wait, if you don't want to buy the game, but you want the digital deluxe upgrade content, that is going to cost you about $23, right? So what would happen is you do not own the game. You don't own the game, but you do own the digital deluxe upgrade, which will also get you 3 days of early access. Now you might be thinking, well, GnittWitt, you can't just be spending $20 to get the game, 3 days early. What else are you getting? You're getting a couple of things, and I think this is fun. It's unfortunate that they're putting a price on it because I think A, the price is a little steep. B, I'm really sick of Microsoft charging money to get the game as part of early access, despite the fact that I've paid for it in the past. I'll admit, put my hands up and be like, I'm a damn dummy who's paid for this shit in the past. I'm sick of paying for it. I'm tempted to pay for it with this new game, but that's also because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But you get other things. You are going to get the Doom Slayer. That is the main playable protagonist in Doom. And you are going to get the Revenant Demon as playable skaters in the game. So if you want to skateboard as the Doom guy, it's going to cost you about 23 bucks Canadian, give or take, to get that. You are also going to get additional songs included in the in-game soundtrack. The trailer that they showed featuring Doom guy had some of the Doom 2016 sounding music in it. I couldn't necessarily point to the individual songs that were in it, but they did say additional songs will be coming to the soundtrack. You will also get exclusive Doomslayer and Revenant and Create a Skater decks. So if you're looking to create a character in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 Remastered, you will be able to get exclusive skateboard decks for it. You will also get exclusive themed Create a Skater items such as t-shirts and hoodies and things like that for your Create a Skater. Now, when I see that, it doesn't scream $20, $23 worth of goodies. It just doesn't. I don't see it as something that's necessarily worth it. So I think what I'll probably do is I will probably wait, like everybody else, for this game to come out July 11th and play it then, and then ignore the part where they put the Doom guy in and all that other cool stuff. They're also doing a collector's edition of the game. I believe this is a physical copy of the game, so makes sense why I didn't see it on the Xbox Digital Store. The collector's edition includes a limited edition full-sized Birdhouse Wings skateboard deck, a physical copy of the game, plus all the digital deluxe edition contents. Now, here's the thing. I don't have the Canadian pricing for the collector's edition. Maybe I can find it. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 collector's edition. Let's see if I can find. Okay, here we go. GameStop. Oh God, fuck off. Okay, GameStop Canada. GameStop Canada is asking $189 for this collector's edition of the game. Now, before you get up in arms saying, what the fuck, $189 for a $67 game, and it's a game that you can play for free as part of Game Pass and all this other shit, what the hell? Keep in mind that you are getting a physical skate deck. You're getting a real tangible thing. It's not like, oh, you're going to get this skateboard deck in the video game. Oh, you're going to get, DLC expansion packs and all this stuff. You're getting a physical, tangible item. And of collector's editions in games, this is actually not that bad. Am I going to spend $189 on this? Fuck no, especially because they're not going to do a physical version of the collector's edition for PC, so I wouldn't do that anyways. But before we get up in arms, put a price on, like, I don't know how much skateboard decks are. Okay. Who sells skateboard decks? Who? Boy, we're really off to the races today on this episode of the podcast. All right, I'm on Zoomies. I'm on the Zoomies website, and I'm looking at some Zero skateboard decks. There's just some pretty nice skateboard decks. I'll tell you right now, first and foremost, if I live with other people. If I lived on my own, I might consider having skateboard decks as wall art in the in the crib, if that was something that I could do. Some people have, Van Gogh, some people have The Last Supper, some people have anything and everything in between. I'm sitting over here being like, this Hello Kitty and girl crossover 50th anniversary skateboard deck, which is $100 by the way, is it's a pretty nice looking skateboard deck. Maybe I would hang that on the wall or something like that. So anyways, you could easily spend about $100 on a skateboard deck if you wanted to. So the idea of spending $189 on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 Collector's Edition, plus you get all the Doom shit, I'll leave that up to you to decide. Tell you what, though, I'm very excited about this. I cannot wait for this. The other thing I should mention is fans who pre-order any edition of the game will also receive access to the Foundry demo in June. You're going to get early access to the demo, because of course you are. And you are going to get the wireframe Tony shader at launch. Now you might be thinking, GnittWitt, you're putting words together. What is the wireframe Tony shader? It is basically the wireframe mesh lines that they do to physically sculpt the character in the game without any of the actual textures and polygons of it. So you're basically just going to see like wireframe Tron ass looking Tony skating around as part of the pre-order for the game. This is being done by Iron Galaxy. That is a studio that made the PC version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 Remastered in 2020. And they also worked on Killer Instinct Rumbleverse, as well as Crash Remastered and the Spyro Remastered trilogies. The question I have is, are we going to see Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 Remastered on Game Pass? And when does that happen? If I'm Activision, if I'm, Xbox, I would seriously wonder, is it worth it to put it out before the new game comes out to get people excited? Or do you put it out after in order to prevent any cannibalization of potential sales and to keep people engaged and go back to those older games? I don't know. Like, I feel like it's kind of sad that they didn't just announce this at the same time as the new game, the 1 and 2 coming to Game Pass already, right? Because we've seen a very slow tick in Activision games coming to Game Pass, right? There's only 2 Call of Duties on Game Pass, and there's like 40,000 Call of Duties, right? We don't have any Tony Hawk game on Game Pass right now. We don't have all of the Blizzard games on Game Pass right now. We don't have Prototype. We don't have the Gun. Where's Gun? Will somebody put Gun on Game Pass for the love of God? The Hood is asking for Gun. Have Gun, will travel. But hey, between then and now, we can look forward to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 Remastered coming out July 11th. That is a remaster of both 3 and 4. And I gotta be honest with you, off the top of my head, just gut check, I think I might, if I had to choose between 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, I think I might be more of a 3 and 4 guy when it comes to it. For one, I think what they did with Tony Hawk 1 is they did keep a lot of the mechanics. So a lot of the mechanics in Tony Hawk are very iterative in terms of like, oh, in Tony Hawk 1, you couldn't manual the skateboard. In Tony Hawk 2, you could manual the skateboard. In Tony Hawk 3, you could do a revert. And basically what a revert is when you're coming down from the half pipe, you can do a 180 twist and transition from an air combo to a flat ground combo, right? So you can go smoothly from, doing a kickflip in the air or indie or whatever melon grab you're doing in the air on the half pipe into seamlessly some sort of manual. And that allows you to not just, keep the combo going, but also transition from, land to air to back to land and stuff like that. Revert, one of the big things in Tony Hawk 3. In Tony Hawk 4, they introduced spine transfers and hip transfers. So you can go from a kind of a horizontal launch through the air. So if you're trying to clear a gap in Tony Hawk's 4, you can go from horizontally navigating through the air to doing basically like essentially a 90-degree drop in the middle of the air to transition into that half pipe. So if you're looking at like you're looking at half pipe on the left, half pipe on the right, and there's a gap that you can clear over top of it. In Tony Hawk 3, 2, or 1, you could either just kind of slowly drop into that half pipe, or you can jump across the half pipe. But in Tony Hawk's 4, while you're in the middle of the air, you can basically hit a button and then just dive down into that half pipe, and then start your half pipe combo or whatever it is that you're doing. So it was one of those things where maybe not quite as essential as manuals or reverts, but an effective way of keeping the combos alive and going in something in Tony Hawk's, while also giving you freedom to maneuver through the environment a little bit easier. It wouldn't be until Tony Hawk's Underground where you're able to get off the skateboard entirely and run around. You would be able to climb various buildings and parts of the environment. They also introduced the ability to combo in and out of getting on and off your board, right? So if you were doing some tricks and you just got off your board in the middle of the air, you would have a little bit of time to run around, reposition yourself, and before that timer ticked down, and then you'd be able to go back into the combo, or your combo ended and stuff like that. I really like Tony Hawk's Underground, so I don't know where we're going with all of this, right? 3 and 4 is the obvious. 3 and 4 remastered is the obvious low-hanging fruit. I'm not like knocking Xbox for doing this. My question is, like, you bought all of this IP from Activision. I know you have to do work to license the soundtrack and things like that, because folks NoFX got to get paid, and bands like that got to get paid, and I'm all for that. But my question is, like, where does this go, right? They already made a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, and it was a bad game. It was a terrible, no good, very, very bad game. Now, in fairness, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 came out like super, super late. Like, they stopped naming them the games for the longest time, and then they finally brought it back as 5, and it was an embarrassment. It was a terrible game. So my question is, like, where do we go with this? Are we gonna remaster Tony Hawk's Underground? Are we going to, put the rest of the games out on Game Pass, regardless of the state of them, remastered or otherwise? Like that, that is a question I have. Will they make a new Tony Hawk's game at some point, right? EA is working on that new skate game. Who knows when that game comes out, but skateboarding seems to be kind of hot right now. I don't know if it's, younger people, younger than myself, getting into, 90s aesthetic and era and culture and things like that. I see a lot of big jeans. I see like goth and mall punks every now and then at the mall. I see baggy clothes. I saw a kid the other day at the mall, and I knew that this kid probably liked skateboarding because he had a black t-shirt on, but had a long sleeve shirt on underneath the t-shirt. And I just feel like people who walk around with black t-shirts on over top of long sleeve shirts probably like skateboarding. That's just my assumption. Tell me if I'm crazy. Tell me if I'm wrong. Are the kids today listening to the soundtrack of Tony Hawk? Like, what's going on with all of that stuff? I don't know, but people kind of approach the Tony Hawk series as partially saving skateboard culture and things like that at the time. So I would be very curious to know where this is all going in terms of remastered new games and the ability to play those old games on Game Pass. My guess is that they would have to remaster every single game, because the licensing for the music has all but expired. I bet the licensing for all of the pro skaters, with the exception of Tony Hawk, has all but expired. So they'd probably have to get lawyers and legal people involved. And if they're going to do that, they might as well put a little bit of work to those games. So we'll see. But hey, July 11th, we'll find out. One other thing about Tony Hawk's before we move on is the exclusion of a notable skater who was originally in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 and would later on become one of the most prominent skaters in the Tony Hawk series, who wasn't named Tony Hawk. Now, this is also relevant to me specifically because on Sunday, during the Academy Awards, I decided to not watch the Academy Awards. And I instead decided to watch the Jackass movie, the very first Jackass movie. And, you know, I forgot about how many naked dudes I was going to be seeing throughout it. I forgot that, you know, some of that stuff, you think like poop is funny, and then you see it, and then it's not funny anymore. And you're just like, man, that's fucking gnarly as shit. But the point is I was watching Jackass, and I was reminded of the existence of Bam Margera, who is not going to be in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, despite originally being in those games. And in the case of Tony Hawk's Underground and Underground 2, he was like a big prominent character in the story of those games. But Bam Margera, unfortunately, he's had a rough go at it. Recently, he's been going through some health and legal issues. And because of that, and, you know, also a prominent member of Jackass, if you remember, Bam Margera frequently whooping the shit out of his dad and tormenting his mom, putting alligators in her kitchen and stuff like that. So Bam Margera not going to be in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. But here's a little bit of context. Margera, who made a name for himself as a member of the Jackass and CKY crews, as well as a skater for the brand Element, could be the only member of the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 roster not returning for the new game. A roster for the newly announced remakes has been revealed, and Margera, who debuted in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, is missing. Activision has revealed the majority of the roster, which I will pull up for you in just a moment. While Activision has teased the more secret that more secret characters will be included, this doesn't typically include classic skaters, which points to Margera not being in the game at all. Interestingly, one Margera will make it into the game, who is Bam's brother, Jess Margera. Jess Margera is the drummer for CKY, whose song 96 Quite Bitter Beings has been confirmed to be included in the game's soundtrack. Now, this is what I want to kind of cover with Bam Margera. Bam Margera has faced a string of health and legal issues in recent years. Due to issues related to substance abuse, he was fired from the Jackass Forever movie, after which he was issued with a restraining order from Jackass director Jeff Tremaine. Tremaine had previously fought for years to include Margera in the reunion film. For context, Jackass Forever is the most recent Jackass movie. It came out in 2022. Video Games Chronicles reached out to Margera and Activision for comment, and there was no comment. Here is what we have. Here's what we have in terms of the roster. I mean, we talked about the roster for WWE, so let's talk about the roster for Tony Hawk. So for the 3 and 4 classic skater roster, we're getting this guy. I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name's Tony Hawk. They're putting Tony Hawk in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. We're also getting Bucky Lasek, Steve Caballero. I've never actually read his name out loud, but anyways, we'll ruin everybody else's name as we go. Kareem Campbell, Jeff Rowley, Andrew Reynolds, Elisa Steamer, Chad Muska, Eric Costin, Rodney Mullen, Jamie Thomas, Rune Gliffberg, and Bob Burnquist. Now, we are also getting some modern skaters. We are getting Reisa Leal, Chloe Covell, Jamie Foy, Zion Wright, and Yuto Horigome. I hope I pronounced that name right. Now, I follow two specifically modern skateboarders on social media. That's what I do. This is what I don't know what you do with your time, but on my time, I like to follow skateboarders on social media, two modern skateboarders. And I would just like to say that I really hope that these two specifically get on the game, get into the game, because I think they are fantastic Oh, I can't even pronounce this guy's name. Hold on. Let me pull this up here. So there are two people that I would like, if I can make a request, I would like to see, Andy Anderson in the Tony Hawk game as a modern skateboarder. I think if you were looking for somebody who is a street skater specifically, I don't know if you can find anybody more innovative and more exciting in the world of skateboarding than Andy Anderson. I think he's tremendous. Every time I watch a video of his, I'm just like fucking blown away. And if you were looking for somebody who is more of a street skater, somebody who is perhaps someone who's more of a vert skater, someone who's maybe more akin to the style of skateboarding that, you know, kind of Tony Hawk, you know, certainly popularized, might I recommend Emma Kawakami, who is 9 years old, busting out 900s and even busted out a 1080. 900, if you don't know, was the move that Tony Hawk pulled off at the X Games, one of the greatest sports achievements moments of all time. If you've never seen the video of Tony Hawk landing the 900 at the X Games, please go do so. Emma is a goddamn like phenom, and she's 9 years old, from Japan, and I could not tell you how her videos came across on my social media, but I think it was like, hey, check out this 9-year-old doing a 900, and I'm like, that's fucking crazy. When I was 9 years old, I probably couldn't even, the only 900 I could pull off when I was 9 years old is in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater at the time. So if I could make a recommendation for those two, please put those two in the game, because that would be fucking rad. All right. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, the wrestling news continues. So stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. I continue to be GnittWitt, and we're going to continue to talk about video game news. Now, I said that the wrestling news was not stopping anytime soon, and I have some good news for you. It will not stop. It can't stop. It won't stop. Okay. We're talking wrestling up and down these roads, 300 days a year, brother. No. This is not quite that. Iconic. I'm just going to read you the headline, and then it'll all make sense. I promise you it'll all make sense. Iconic game publisher Acclaim has been resurrected with wrestler Jeff Jarrett as an advisor. The U.S. publisher, which specialized in licensed games, went bankrupt 20 years ago. Sorry, I couldn't quite stop myself from laughing. Originally founded in 1987 by a trio of former Activision employees, Acclaim became known for a steady stream of games based on popular intellectual property before eventually declaring bankruptcy in September of 2004. So, you know, you would see if there was a movie game coming out, you know, in the 90s, Acclaim was working on it. If, you know, they did Alien 3, the game, and all of this other stuff. So you might be wondering, how does Jeff Jarrett fit into all this? We'll cover that in just a moment. But now, more than 20 years later, Acclaim is back, led by CEO Alex Joseph, the former founder and CEO of Graffiti Games. Now, if you don't know Graffiti Games, they're the people that made Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, among other games. In a statement, the publisher says its initial goals are to support indie developers and reignite classic franchises, providing funding, marketing, and PC support to indie studios. Acclaim was perhaps best known for its licensed games, and one of the key aims of the new company is to resurrect and revitalize its beloved portfolio of classic IP enjoyed for years by millions of players. The first question I have off the top of my head. First question, you in the back with the bald head. Do you still have any of these IPs in your portfolio? Like, when you go bankrupt, do you not just sell a lot of what you own, be it intellectual property or physical things like, what is there to revitalize and revitalize and resurrect over at Acclaimed? Now, to accomplish this, an advisory board of esteemed industry leaders has been set up to shape the publisher's future, with board members including Russell Binder, the founding partner of licensing and merchandising company Stryker Entertainment, Mark Kaplan, the founder of business consultancy firm Ridge Partners, and wrestler and entrepreneur Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett, who previously starred in Acclaim's WWF Attitude game, said, "For more than 3 decades, I've had the privilege to have been part of both the wrestling and gaming universes, and I'm thrilled to now be a partner in the revival of Acclaim, an iconic publisher known for releasing some of the most legendary games of the 80s and 90s. If you didn't get my reading of his last bit there, the most legendary games should be in air quotes when it comes to Acclaim, okay? I'm not saying Acclaim had nothing but stinkers, but some of the most legendary games is a loaded phrase. That's a working phrase, if I may use some sort of wrestling terminology here. He goes on to say, oh God, Jeff Jarrett. He goes on to say, "From my early involvement with the publisher's hit 16-bit WWF titles to my experience helping shape the TNA wrestling series, which spawned the first video game wrestler to become a full-time roster in the Squared Circle, I've seen firsthand the type of impact great games can have on players and fans. Resurrecting Acclaim is an opportunity to impart the same degree of passion and love to a new generation, and I'm excited to be involved." Oh, man. Acclaim published around 300 games over the course of its original run, many of which were based on popular movies and TV shows. Notable hits include its WWF games, The Simpsons, Bart vs. the Space Mutants, Terminator 2, Alien 3, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, South Park, and the home versions of such midway series as Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam. I can't believe I'm going to do this. I can't believe I'm doing this to myself. I want to look at games put out by Acclaim. I'm not going to go through the whole history. By no means am I going to do that. But just in case you were wondering what sort of bangers, and I'm going to be picking and choosing here, of course, but if you wanted to know what sort of bangers Acclaim was putting out, do you remember the TV show Alias? They put out the PlayStation 2 game based on Alias. They put out Showdown, Legends of Wrestling, which featured wrestling characters, but did not actually feature any of the licenses. Like, it didn't have WCW, it didn't have WWF or anything like that. It was just like, hey, we got Hulk Hogan and we got Andre the Giant and Sting and Eddie Guerrero and whatnot, but they did not, it was not actually like a WWE game. What else did they put out? Let's see here. The Powerpuff, whatever. I mean, listen, I like Powerpuff Girls. But they put out the GameCube version of the Powerpuff Girls Relish Rampage Pickled Edition. They did the PS2 version of NBA Jam. They did Speed Kings. ATV Quad Power Racing, which is the knockoff ATV Off-Road Fury or whatever they called it game. BMX XXX. Now, when we talk about, okay, here we go. When we talk about extreme sports games such as Tony Hawk, there were a lot of also ran knockoff, bootleg ass, piece of shit extreme sports games that were coming out, right? You know, people were like, oh, fuck it, we got to put the Simpsons on a skateboard. We got to get a BMX game out there. We got to get a surfing game. We got to get a wakeboarding game. We got to get a rollerblade game. And actually, that rollerblade game is not bad. But one of the games that they put out, Acclaim put out, is BMX XXX, which was supposed to be the third game in the Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX series. Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX by Acclaim, actually not bad. The first and second game, not bad. Unfortunately, due to some poor sales surrounding Dave Mirra, they wanted to make another game, but they didn't want, but they wanted to make some changes. And this is a real video game. It came out. You can play it. I'm not lying to you. BMX XXX is an M-rated, naughty, mature, extreme BMX game. It's got boobs. It's got butts. It's got swear words. It's got crude humor. And it is a commercial failure. It is a critical failure. And it is an embarrassment on the Acclaim name. So if you're wondering what Jeff Jarrett is hitching his wagon to, you know, don't get me wrong. These folks also put out, you know, Burnout, like the first two Burnout games, right? They put out, like I said, the Dave Mirra, the original Dave Mirra games. Not too bad. They put out, man, I'm really scraping. Here we go. ECW Anarchy Rules for the PlayStation 1. Now that is not a very good video game. You see what I'm kind of getting at with Acclaim? They were putting out, I'll put it to you this way. When you went over to your cousin's house, and I'm not picking on my cousin or any cousins that I have, but you ever like go over to like a friend's house or a cousin's house and you're like, oh, what the fuck games do they have? What the hell's going on here? Those were all probably games that they had put out by Acclaim. South Park Rally, they did in 2000, they put out a South Park game that is a kart racing game. Stinks. Not good. Not good at all. South Park, in 1991, South Park, it was a first person shooter. It's fucking terrible. Terrible. Chef Love Shack is okay. Chef Love Shack was a game show style party game with some mini games. The mini games were pretty bad, but the idea of Chef from South Park hosting a Jeopardy-esque game show, not the worst thing. But South Park, fucking terrible. Awful. So, hey, if you were wondering who put out the video game adaptation of Space Jam, Acclaim. Excuse me. Anyways, I don't want to just keep picking on Acclaim. You know, there were some decent games from Acclaim. Sometimes it seemed like there were decent games in spite of themselves. Oh, in 1995, they did the Demolition Man game. I bet that game is really good. Really, really good. RoboCop 3, that's what you want. I want a video game adaptation of RoboCop 3. Anyways, this is all to say that this is the same man who tried to make Global Force Wrestling a thing. And I don't want to pick on Jeff Jarrett too much because I have had some ups and downs with Jeff Jarrett, especially in recent years. When Jeff Jarrett first showed up in AEW, which is the wrestling program that I watch, I remember thinking, God help me, he's going to ruin AEW. All Elite Wrestling will die at the hands of Jeff Jarrett. And that didn't happen. And you know what actually did happen is that Jeff Jarrett kind of grew on me. You know, his group with Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, and all that stuff. It started to grow on me to some extent. His you know, kind of storyline around Owen Hart and Bryan Danielson, I thought that stuff was not bad. He really started to grow on me. And then he had that fucking feud with MJF. Holy shit. God, that might be some of the worst shit I've seen in AEW in literal years. Like that promo where they're talking about, oh, your wife's a whore, your mom's a whore, and all this stuff. Fuck. Just god awful programming, courtesy of All Elite Wrestling. Now, here's the thing. MJF, I feel like, especially in his point in his career, and I hate to make this all about wrestling, MJF at this point in his career can bounce back from bad segments, bad programs, bad storylines. He can bounce back. Jeff Jarrett really doesn't have a lot of road left in his career. So if something is going to not work, because he's not a main player in something like AEW, it makes it really hard to heat Jeff Jarrett back up. And honestly, since they seemingly gave up on that storyline between MJF and Jeff Jarrett, he's nowhere to be seen. And now we're having a better storyline with MJF and Hangman Adam Page, culminating in a match at Revolution on Sunday. But God, I've just gone back and forth with Jeff Jarrett. And then I think about Global Force Wrestling, and I think about, what was it? He was like, Jeff Jarrett was like selling gold using the Global Force name. Was it Global Force Gold? I don't even know if I can find it. Oh, I don't know if I can find Global Force Gold. I want to say, don't quote me on this, I want to say Jeff Jarrett was trying to sell gold at some point in time, but I could be wrong. People are saying they cannot find the video where Jeff Jarrett was potentially pitching something resembling a pyramid scheme, but I could be wrong. It doesn't matter. The point is that I don't have a lot of faith in Acclaim because of the history of Acclaim. I don't have a lot of faith in Acclaim because they've seemingly given Jeff Jarrett some amount of money and involvement in this company. And Jeff Jarrett's involvement is talking about the wrestling games that he was a part of that weren't very good. So, I don't know, man. Listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Indie developers need as much support as humanly possible when it comes to providing funding and marketing and release strategies and support for their games, whether that be on PC or whether that be on consoles. So if that's what Acclaim is going to do, awesome. But if at some point Acclaim's like, you know what? That True Lies game that came out, we should find a way to put out that True Lies game again. Then fuck everything and fuck all video games forever. Because we just don't need light garbage licensed, games at this point in time. Remember when a movie came out and then a game came out right around the time of that movie? And that game was usually fucking trash. Trash. We don't see that a lot anymore because we're better than that. People stopped buying those games. But also there is the margins are so slim that by the time you've paid for the rights to the movie, you have to make the game for about $9 over the course of 3 months and get it out the door in time for the movie release. This doesn't work. There's a reason why there's no Superman game coming out in time for the movie. And I'm not just talking about the idea that Warner Brothers is a complete clusterfuck at the moment. It just doesn't make sense for them to try to put out a game in time for the Superman movie. That's why we're not seeing fucking a Nosferatu game, as much as that might be weird. It's shit like that. So if that eventually is the road that Acclaim's going to go down, I don't need it. I don't want it. We are better than that. But I also just don't think that the Acclaim needs to be focusing on, giving indie developers support and publishing while having people like Jeff Jarrett attached to it. Like, if you're an indie developer, if you're a group of 3 people trying to put out a game, what does Jeff Jarrett have to offer you? What does he have to offer? Nothing. Nothing. He's got nothing to offer indie publishers. Indie developers. I just don't think that he does. So as a result, I don't know if some of the other people involved even have the right intentions in terms of bringing the Acclaim name back. But you know what? I could be wrong, and I would love to be wrong. Do I think I'm going to be wrong? We'll find out. Let's move on. Oh, I totally forgot about this news story. Speaking of licensed video games based on old movies, a new 2D game based on Terminator 2 is coming in September. This is called Terminator 2D No Fate, and it is coming to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and the personal computer September 5th. Now, this is coming from publisher Reef Entertainment, and which I've never actually heard of Reef Entertainment. They say the game will blend iconic scenes from Terminator 2 Judgment Day with original scenarios and will have multiple endings, meaning humanity's fate is yours to decide. Now, if you're wondering what do you do in this 2D video game, you will be playing as Sarah Connor and the T-800, played in the movie by Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the 90s as they try to stop the T-1000 and Skynet before the human race is wiped out. You will also play as John Connor in the future as he fights in the war against machines as the humans' last resort. Terminator 2D No Fate is being developed by Bitmap Bureau, the retro-focused studio previously responsible for such titles as Xenocrisis, Final Vendetta, and 88 Heroes. There is a trailer now up if you want to watch it. For context, there were 5 separate Terminator games that were originally released between 1991 and 1993 to tie in with the blockbuster movie. The most popular, and the best one, was T2 the arcade game, a light gun shooting game that was originally released in arcades before being ported to home systems. The developers talk more about the game, and I'm not saying the game's going to be bad. I'm not saying anything about the game whatsoever. I actually think the art style is kind of neat, like the 2D graphics. This game looks okay. It looks okay. There's a part where Sarah Connor is doing pull-ups in the hospital, and that's pretty neat. I think the animation, I think the thing for me is it's pixelated graphics, retro style graphics, all that stuff. That's fine. That's cool. I will say I think the animation on it looks neat. There's some good animation and stuff to this as well. So this could be cool. We'll find out. Last week, we talked about Monster Hunter Wilds and how popular it is when it comes to Capcom games. And I know that for some people, it might have been their first time hearing about Monster Hunter and being like, well, I know about Dead Rising, and I know about Mega Man, and I know about, Resident Evil. I never heard about this Monster Hunter. I've heard of Dragon's Dogma, maybe from last year. But what's up with Monster Hunter? And I cannot stress enough just how goddamn popular Monster Hunter is, because Monster Hunter Wilds is already the fastest selling Capcom game ever. The game was released on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S last Friday, and has already sold more than 8 million units in 3 days, which Capcom says eclipses any previous release from the company. The previous entry in the series, Monster Hunter World, is currently Capcom's best-selling game ever. As of January, that game had sold more than 28 million copies, meaning that during its opening weekend, Monster Hunter Wilds has managed to clear more than a quarter of Monster Hunter World's lifetime sales. And that's also taking into account, Monster Hunter World being on sale for like $10 during Black Friday or whatever, right? Fucking mind-boggling how crazy popular Monster Hunter Wilds is, or Monster Hunter in general is, and Monster Hunter in general is, excuse me. The other thing I should stress is that it's not just like a worldwide thing. It's not just a North American thing. Monster Hunter is also incredibly popular in Japan. Like, Japan really rides with the homies when it comes to Monster Hunter. Incredibly popular in the native country of Japan, but also in the world as well. And you see that with, a series blowing up with Monster Hunter World and continuing to grow with Monster Hunter Wild. So I just want to say, congratulations to Capcom and all of their success. 8 million copies in 3 days is Nothing to sneeze at, but also incredibly impressive. We're going to keep talking about Japan, but this time we're going to talk about Sega. You might be wondering what's going on at Sega. They announced that, reboot of a lot of their old arcade games. Are going to do a new Crazy Taxi and Shinobi and all of this stuff. But they also were kind of trying to cover things like their bigger AAA games and what you can expect from them. So this doesn't seem like good news. I mean, it could turn out to be great, but I don't know. And my initial reaction is when I see the words fewer, I don't always get excited, but here's what Sega has to say. Sega is promising fewer new games, but deeper investments in Sonic the Hedgehog, the publisher Atlas, and the Like a Dragon / Yakuza series. Now, if you were wondering, Atlas are the people that make Persona. And they also made Metaphor ReFantazio. So, Atlas is bringing the heat, when it comes to a division of Sega, Atlas is certainly bringing the heat on their end. Now, for context, during its current business year, which ends on March 31st, the Japanese publisher has released more than 7 full games, including Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, Metaphor ReFantazio, Sonic X Shadow Generations, and Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Asked about its plans for the next fiscal year, which runs from April 2025 until March of 2026, Sega said it would release fewer full games overall, To which they said currently the company's full games, those that aren't free-to-play games, include Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, Shinobi Art of Vengeance, and Project Century, plus its legacy IP revivals for Virtua Fighter, Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, Golden Axe, and Streets of Rage. The plan is currently being formulated, but we expect the volume of new titles in the full game category to be lowered than this fiscal year. On the other hand, we expect continuous revenue contributions from repeat sales of new titles in the full game category this fiscal year and full-scale revenue contributions for new titles in free-to-play. So, that's when I hear they're going to put out less big games, that makes sense, right? It's a very hit-driven business right now. Every company is double, triple, quadrupling down on the things that work, right? So expect more Yakuza games. Expect more Sonic the Hedgehog games. And it seems like anything that Atlas does at the moment kind of turns to gold, whether it's Persona 5 or Metaphor ReFantazio. So expect more of that from Sega. I don't know if their legacy IP revival, project's going to work out for them or not. How many people are going to be excited about Shinobi or Crazy Taxi or Streets of Rage or all that stuff? We'll find out. But the reason I brought up the idea of fewer new games coming from Sega is because Sega has also taken Capcom's crown in some ways. Metacritic, I often refer to OpenCritic for reviews, gathering reviews and stuff like that. Metacritic is another place that you can do that. So I'm going to be referencing data from Metacritic instead of OpenCritic this time. But Sega has taken Capcom's crown as Metacritic's highest rated and highest reviewed publisher of 2024. Metaphor ReFantazio, which was published by Sega, beat 2023's winner Capcom in annual publisher ranking. So I have all the numbers. I got all the details right here, right now. So let's do some math. All right. The most weight was given to the average meta score of their games, but it also takes into account where the percentage of scored titles with good reviews, at least 75, the percentage of scored products with bad reviews, 49 or lower, and the number of great games released, 90 or higher. So it's taking into account games that had a good review score of at least 75, the games that got a bad review score, 49 or lower, and the number of games with a great 90 or higher review scores. Only publishers with 5 or more distinct titles released in 2024 were eligible to be included in the rankings, which does not take into account mobile games. The top 10 publishers are listed along with their point score, the average Metascore, and their previous year's ranking. So this is basically, I'm going to read you like their total review score, which to me doesn't mean a lot. The average review score, which I think makes a lot more sense to me, and where they were ranked last year. So the number 1 best reviewed publisher on Metacritic this 2024 was Sega. Sega had 325.5 points. Their average review score was 82.9. Last year, they were ranked 9th. So they went from 9th to 1st in 1 year, courtesy of games like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Metaphor ReFantazio. Capcom comes in second with 323.1 points, with an average review of 82.1. Last year, they were in first place. Axis Games has 318.1 points, with an average of 78.8. Last year, they were 7th. Sony, number 4, 314 points, with an 80.9 average. Last year, they were 13th. Focus Entertainment had 309.6 points. They averaged 79.1. Last year, they were 18th. Gamera Games, debuting in the top 10. Last year, they were not on the top 10 at all. They had, in fact, I think there might have been even a new publisher because they were saying not applicable. They weren't even on the radar last year. Gamera Games, 303.5 points, averaging 80.2. Not in contention at all last year. Square Enix also tied for 6th place with Gamera Games, 303.5 points, averaging 78.5 on their scores. Last year, they were 19th. Raw Fury had 301.1 points, averaging 78.5 for the reviews. Last year, they were 2nd place, so they dropped from 2nd to 8th. Microsoft, 301 points, averaging 79.4 review score. Last year, they were 15th. In 2023, they were 15th. And Annapurna, 298.7 points, averaging 79.2. And last year, or the year before that, they were 5th. So if you want some banger critically acclaimed games, might I recommend games made by Sega and Capcom within the years of 2023 and 2024, because they are cooking. Well, actually, in the case of Sega, games from last year, they seem to be doing quite well for themselves. Now, of course, critical reviews does not necessarily guarantee, commercial success. But my understanding is that, games like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Metaphor, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, those are selling quite well. So it seems like Sega at the moment, having their cake and eating it too, but of course, Capcom right there with them. This is our final news story, and I just brought this up because I've been thinking about this game a little bit more as it gets closer to release. At the time, this game was not really on my radar, despite liking the franchise. I just kind of felt like, whatever. It might be whatever. And it still might be whatever. But you might be wondering, how long is Assassin's Creed Shadows' main story campaign going to be? And Ubisoft has confirmed that Assassin's Creed Shadow will take you about 30 to 40 hours to complete the main story. Which begs the question, how much time will you spend with side content? Now, everybody's going to be different, right? Everybody's going to be different. There are some people who play through open world games and completely ignore the other side content. There are some people who play through open world games and completely ignore the main story. There's people in between. There are people who want to, find every collectible, complete every side quest, upgrade every weapon, find every item, things like that. More power to them. So, if I were to guess that it's going to take you about 30 to 40 hours to play through the main Assassin's Creed Shadow campaign, I could easily potentially see a world where you double that, at least double that for the side content. It depends on how much side content there is, of course. But to me, when I look at that, I'm be like, okay, double that, and that's probably the average for people who actually play through it. Now, keep in mind that very, very, very few people actually beat video games these days. Very few people actually see a video game through to completion to the end. The reason why I know this is because take a look at the game you're currently playing. If it's a story-based game, take a look at the game you're currently playing. If there's an achievement or a trophy for the game that you're playing that will give you a trophy or achievement when you beat the game, go and see the percentage of people that earn that trophy. Go and see, because if I had to guess, it's probably pretty fucking low. Like in the single digit percentage. I'm going to go to my Xbox profile here, just because it's probably the easiest way for me to do this. And I'm going to go and I'm going to pick Final Fantasy VII Windows Edition. Final Fantasy VII Windows Edition, okay? This is an older game. This is a re-release of an older game. Took me 22 hours to beat. I have the achievement for beating Final Fantasy VII. I unlocked it just at the end of last year, and it says that 4.68% of players unlocked this achievement. Well, you might be thinking, okay, well, GnittWitt, come on. Final Fantasy, it's a big RPG. Give me something smaller. Give me a more narrow, focused game as an example of these people earning achievements. Okay. Indiana Jones. Will it tell me was there an achievement for, I guess I'll sort by most rare. Oh, you know what? It doesn't give me a clear, in the case of Indiana Jones, it's like referencing the names of the levels and the missions, and I don't know what the names and the levels and the missions were. So let me pick a different game. Let me pick a different game here. Assassin's Creed Origins. Oh, I don't, because I didn't play the Xbox version of Assassin's Creed Origins. It's not going to show me that here. Come on, give me something. Give me something I can reference. I mean, listen, 4.68% of people beating, fucking, what the hell's that game called? Final Fantasy is not great. It's certainly not great. Okay, here we go. Redfall. Does Redfall show me, hey, complete the game? Of course it doesn't. Complete your first neighborhood. Destroy the first. I mean, I don't know why I mean, it's a terrible game. Okay, so there's a quest. Sorry, there's an achievement called complete all of the main missions in Burial Point, in which 3.55% of players unlock this. I'm assuming that Burial Point is the last area of the game, if I had to guess. So we're talking just fuzzy, rough math. Okay, one last game. Still Wakes the Deep. Which is in fairness, is Still Wakes the Deep. Now, in fairness, Still Wakes the Deep is an incredibly short game. It took me 5 hours to beat Still Wakes the Deep. 25% of players beat Still Wakes the Deep according to the Xbox achievements. So, less than 30% of people are beating video games to completions anyways. Right? Like, it's not a lot of people. So, the idea of like, oh, it's going to be 40 hours, it's going to be 60 hours, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, like, less than 30% of people beat video games anyways. But I want to cover, just for context, the idea that it'll probably take you closer to 80 hours to do almost everything in Assassin's Creed Shadows. What I want to do is just look back on howlongtobeat.com and the recent length of Assassin's Creed games. This is data that's already been referenced by How Long to Beat, presented by videogameschronicles.com. According to the game length tracking site How Long to Beat, Origins took about 30 hours to finish the main story and about 85 hours to complete everything. That's Assassin's Creed Origins. Assassin's Creed Odyssey took about 45 hours to beat the main story, while completionists spent about 144 hours with the game. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes about 61 hours to finish the main story and about 148 hours to complete everything. I will just say that if it has my details, I would love to know. Valhalla. Does it have my achievements? Does it track achievements on here? No. How much time did I put into Assassin's Creed Valhalla? I bet I put a fuck ton of hours into I probably put too much time into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, all things considered. Does it have it? Will it show me? Game page. Apparently I put 96 hours into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, in fairness, I remember I was streaming the game at the time and I didn't even do everything. So there is a chance that, 148 hours, it probably seems reasonable to get everything done in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But I was done with that game, dude. I was so done with that game before I even hit the 90-hour mark. Long story short, less than 30% of people complete games. And I'm going to guess that even half of that percentage, 100% everything there is to be done in the game. So honestly, whether the game is 30 to 40 hours or whether it's 80 to 100 hours, as long as Assassin's Creed Shadows is good, I'll probably be okay with it. But we won't find out if Assassin's Creed Shadows is any good until March 20th when it comes out on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. That was our last news story. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the games that I've been playing. I'm going to try to answer some of your listener questions because I got some people asking me some questions the other day, and we'll be right back. Stick around. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back from our final break. I was asked, and I'm grabbing my phone here, not because I am unprofessional, but because I was asked a really good question the other day. And was asked by a family member who listens to the podcast. They said, what is my favorite all-time video game or video game series? And it's funny. We're like 134 episodes into the podcast, and I don't often talk about a lot of older games and stuff like that. One of the reasons for that is because this podcast focuses quite a bit on news. So this idea of kind of looking forward, what's next, what's coming out, and things like that, right? I feel like there are times where I'm like almost cautious about the idea of talking about old games just because it's like, well, what if you can't play this game, because of, you can't play it on a new console, or, what if the game maybe doesn't hold up the way I thought it did? This, that, and the other thing. And I don't mind talking about the, old games that I like and favorite and stuff like that. It's just, I don't end up spending a lot of time thinking about it. I might go back and play an old game and I'll just be like, oh, that was great. But maybe it's just nostalgia talking. Maybe it's just, the joy that I have is the joy that I experienced as a child, which I can no longer recapture in my adult life, is just the thing that makes me turn to these older games. But, I appreciate being asked this question because I think the timing of recent news has kind of solidified how I feel. So if I were trying to tackle this question of like, what's my favorite game of all time, or what's my favorite game series? I think for me, my favorite game series is probably Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I really think that it is the Tony Hawk games. Now we were talking about, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, 2, 3, and 4. earlier on in the show, but I have a lot of love for Tony Hawk's Underground, the PS2 game Tony Hawk's Underground, with the larger open world areas, the ability to get off your skateboard, the story that it tries to tell of like your kind of rags to riches storyline. I think that game is great. I also think that Tony Hawk's Project 8, which is one of the older games in the series, originally came out on PS2 and PS3. Also a tremendous game, but it's not just like the individual games that I find so great about Tony Hawk, the Tony Hawk series. There's a lot more to it than that. For one, Tony Hawk was, starting with the first game, Tony Hawk was a series where they put out a new game every year. The way that they put out a new Call of Duty every year, the way that Activision used to put out a new Guitar Hero every year. So every year you could look forward to, a new Tony Hawk game, which was great. But also because of that, some of the Tony Hawk games straddled the line between generations. So for example, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 were originally PlayStation 1 games, right? They ended up doing a remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the original Xbox. That's a game I've never actually played before. But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 came out on both the PlayStation 3 and the they came out. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 originally came out on the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2. So even in terms of like, obviously the PlayStation 2 version is going to be the better version. But it was also fascinating to like go and be like, okay, this Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 game, it's the first one where they introduced the open world concept. There's no timer. You're going to go take on individual missions, individual challenges at your own pace. And then seeing how that translated into the PlayStation 1 version of that game, with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, that was the last game that had the traditional run-based 2-minute, get your goals done, get your challenges done kind of gameplay, and seeing how that, worked on the PlayStation 1 and 2, it was fairly similar, right? But when you have something like a big change, like a more open-ended nature in Tony Hawk's 4, seeing how that worked on the PlayStation 1 and 2 was quite fascinating, right? It's not just about like seeing the individual changes from game to game or the way that different generations of consoles handled those games. For me, a lot of it is also just the style of game, the sense of humor that those games had, the soundtrack that those games had, the introduction to skateboarding culture and that sort of genre of like punk and things like that. And I'm not talking punk as in music. I'm talking punk as in just like, that sort of style at the time. Just the first time I heard Anthrax and Public Enemy's Bring the Noise, it blew my goddamn mind. It like young GnittWitt's mind was just forever changed hearing, Anthrax and Public Enemy's Bring the Noise on the Tony Hawk 2 soundtrack, hearing Rage Against the Machine for the first time as part of the Tony Hawk soundtrack blew my mind, right? And not just like those bands, but also, hearing, ska music, and ska punk in the form of like, Goldfinger, Superman, which is on the, Superman by Goldfinger, which is on the Tony Hawk 1 soundtrack, and just all this stuff. Like the music was just so crazy to me, who, my parents, I grew up with parents who were very classic rock focused, and they're still classic rock focused. And there's nothing wrong with classic rock. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and talk about classic rock all day. I may not be the biggest Led Zeppelin fan at all. I might not be the biggest Rush fan. I might not be the biggest whatever fan. I'm not sitting around listening to the fucking Beatles or whatever. But there was a time and a place where that was something that I was very much exposed to. And then hearing the Tony Hawk 2 soundtrack just I don't know what else to say other than it blew my mind in terms of what other music could be, what type of genre mashups. Again, like this, the idea of like this rap rock, kind of fusion with Rage Against the Machine and Public Enemy's Bring the Noise, Public Enemy and Anthrax's Bring the Noise, just blew my goddamn mind. The sense of humor in terms of like, oh, finding, the idea of like stunts and bales being funny. Like, oh, this guy totally wiped out. That's kind of funny. Oh, they're doing this ridiculous stunt. That's kind of funny. The idea of destruction of public property. And I know we're like getting into like the weeds a little bit, but like blowing shit up and breaking shit and all of that stuff is like, I find pretty humorous and funny to this day. It's probably why I watched that Jackass movie not that long ago and was like, this movie still holds up. This movie's still pretty funny. Like all of that stuff just is being something that I, carry with me. The idea of like, stunt people and extreme sports athletes and just all that stuff still sticking to me today is probably why I enjoy wrestling as much as I do, right? To some extent, right? It's probably why like one of my favorite wrestlers is Darby Allin. Cause I'm like, basically Darby Allin is what happens when you take Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Jackass, and wrestling and you put it all together and you're like, this guy, and also he's an incredible technical wrestler on top of that. And you're just like, wow, this is maybe my favorite wrestler, potentially of all time, next to a Sting or something like that. So to me, like when I talk about like my love of like the Tony Hawk franchise, it does go, I think, beyond just the games, like what those games introduced me to. But, I will probably remember a lot of the controls for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and those games for a very, very long time. If God forbid, dementia or Alzheimer's or any sort of brain issue takes me, I would die happy knowing that one of the last things I probably will remember in this life is some of the controls for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So if I'm talking favorite game series, it is probably Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. If I were to say like favorite individual game, I'd have to go back and play it, which I try to do every year or so, but favorite game might actually be Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I know we were talking about that last week on the show. Castlevania Symphony of the Night might be my favorite individual game of all time, but I just came off finishing Mass Effect 1. That's an incredible game. And I remember replaying it, and like one of the first things I thought when I finished replaying it was like, man, I kind of want to go back and replay it and make different choices and do all this other stuff. Maybe pick a different character and all that shit. Maybe play it as a male protagonist this time instead of the female shepherd protagonist and all that stuff. So I'm not saying Mass Effect 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. It's just I started thinking about that shortly after playing through, which is probably the sign of a good game. But if I were to like stick to my guns, I'm sure these answers will change over time as I learn, as I grow, as I play in other games. But if I were to say favorite game series, it's probably Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And if I were to say favorite individual game, it is probably Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I've been playing some games. I haven't been playing those games, but I have been playing some games. I made a whole bunch of videos actually, but I made a video on social media talking about kind of my struggles with Avowed, primarily with the writing, the sense of place in the world, what I'm doing, bigger picture, all that stuff. And at the time when I made the video, I was pretty convinced I was going to stop playing Avowed. The idea was I was going to bounce off of it. I wasn't going to play it anymore. And then I found myself drawn back to it primarily because of the combat and running around the open world and a lot of the gameplay. Like I still struggle with caring about a lot of what you're doing in that game and why. And I think for an RPG where you have dialogue choices and consequences for your actions and different ways you can influence the story and the world, I think to not care about that stuff, I think really fucks your ability to properly appreciate and enjoy that game. And I just don't think like Avowed is a game that I should play so mindlessly. The problem is that I kind of skipped through a couple of things, so I just stopped caring at some point. So now if I were to go back, I'd have to probably replay that game again, pay attention to the choices I didn't initially care about the first time, and see if any of that stuff matters to me. And I don't know if I want to play through Avowed again. I guess I could maybe load up an older save, but I enjoy the combat. I enjoy leveling up my pistol and leveling up my dagger and, equipping better loot and breaking down items to upgrade the items that I do have and all of that stuff. I think that stuff is really neat. It's really tight and it's kinetic and fun. I struggle with caring about the rest of the world. And I don't know if that should just completely stop me from playing more Avowed or not. I made that video saying I was going to drop it, and then I quickly started going back and playing it again. So I don't know. Like I'm really torn on Avowed at the moment. I have been continuing to play through Mass Effect 2. I remember saying, like, oh, I don't think Mass Effect 2 is as good of a game as Mass Effect 1. I stand by that. I will say that the writing, in terms of just the story beats and plots and some of the character development and stuff like that, I think Mass Effect 2 has an incredibly strong story and writing, and I think a lot of that stuff is really great. I think it's just the gameplay being a little simplified, kind of dumbing down into just a straightforward shooter that I still don't care quite that much for. But hey, if you like third-person shooters, cover-based shooters, but you also want to make cool story choice options and, dialogue options and all that stuff, like, yeah, Mass Effect 2 is a great game, and I still think Mass Effect is a great game. But, the more I play it, the more I'm reminded of, like, oh, when you meet such and such character, or you reunite with such and such character and they react to the choices and what's happened to Shepard since the first game and all that stuff, like, it is really great. It is really, really cool. And for that, I am quite enjoying Mass Effect 2 as a result. I am definitely planning on, some people wondering, like, what are the new games, GnittWitt, what are you going to play and all of that stuff. I definitely have my eye on Assassin's Creed Shadows. I will be playing that day one when it comes out, because I am going to be getting it as part of the Ubisoft subscription service, whatever that thing's called. I will definitely play that and check that out. I'm just seeing what else I've been kind of playing at the moment. I have a bunch of demos as part of Steam's Next Fest. I haven't gotten around to playing a lot of those demos. The demos that I did play didn't quite grab me, so I'm not going to cover those at the moment, but I'll probably keep picking at Avowed. I might just kind of, reread a lot of the quest, the story mission descriptions and quest outlines and all that stuff, and see if I can kind of catch back up on what it is I'm actually doing in that game and some of the choices that I have made. Because if I'm going to keep playing it, I should probably pay attention to the story, despite the fact it didn't initially grab me the first time around, and I've skipped a couple of things since then. Or maybe by the end it won't matter, because I'll have enjoyed just playing the game as it is. Speaking of playing games as it is, I have also been playing through Fallout New Vegas, and there is a very good chance that the final episode will be happening on Friday. I've been playing through Fallout New Vegas as part of New Year New Vegas over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. There's also archives of that up on my YouTube channel if you want to watch those. At the start of doing this series, I was so excited. I was like, you know what? Fallout New Vegas is probably my favorite Fallout game. I can't wait to play it. And over time, I have struggled with Fallout New Vegas. I think, even though the shooting is a little wonky because it's an older game, I think the thing for me that I kind of struggle with is the way that it presents a lot of the factions in the game. And they do not give you a lot of information in terms of who these factions are, what the consequences are for aligning with them. I just feel like I've never been given a lot of information in terms of how to properly make a choice in something like Fallout New Vegas. I've also had terrible autosaves. In Fallout, you can adjust how quickly the game autosaves. And I think last episode, I literally lost like 30 minutes of progress or something because the autosave wouldn't fucking work correctly. I have had I've had quests completely break on me where, like, people are supposed to give me dialogue options that don't work. I'm supposed to be presented with options that are non-existent. I've had quests and stuff like that break for me in Fallout New Vegas. So it's a scenario where I'm sure there's plenty of other side stuff I could have done. There's probably a lot of important side quests I could have done, but I'm at the point now where I'm just kind of gunning towards the ending of that game so I can just wrap that series up. I do plan on playing another game every Friday as part of my, content creation and Twitch streaming and all that stuff. I'm not too sure what game I want to play next, but I would like to start another game that is a full playthrough that you can watch over at Twitch or over on YouTube, wherever you want to do that stuff. I'm just kind of humming and hawing over what games to do next, whether it be a game that I revisit that I maybe haven't played in a long, long time, like New Vegas, a game that I'm familiar with, a game that I'm not familiar with, but haven't played, or any of that stuff. So I'm thinking about it for right now. But I think that is going to do it for the podcast. Favorite game series, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I cannot wait for 3 and 4 to come out. I should probably go back and play Castlevania Symphony of the Night because it is an incredible video game. And if you've not played it, it's an older PlayStation 1 era game, but I think it is fantastic, incredible music and just style and just all the stuff. That is a great game. And we'll see what we're going to play next. We'll see what the gaming world brings us between now and next week. But I have been GnittWitt. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. I don't know why I just said that because I'm definitely not on Twitter. I deleted my whole account. I'm just so used to saying it. Excuse me. You'll have to accept my apology. But linktree.com/GnittWitt. That'll take you to all the places where I currently exist on the internet. That is going to do it for Glitch Report. We will see you all next week. Take it easy.